And we are back with Science Mike, Mike McHargue. So Mike, a lot of people are still kind of skeptical about the origins of the coronavirus. China just recently let outside observers into Wuhan. What do you know what the envoy's findings were? I mean, I know that. Do you think we have an answer now, or is there still real doubt amongst the scientific community about patient zero?
Oh, there's lots of doubt in terms of where the virus came from precisely. There's two leading thoughts in the scientific community. Number one is that species to species transfer, which is a common and a well-known path that pandemics happen in human society. It's the intersection of dense urban populations, agriculture, and habitat intrusion that creates pandemics in the first place, right? Early societies didn't have pandemics. It required a certain level of agricultural integration with large populations of people. The other kind of hypothesis, which is, I think, gaining steam, not just among like conspiracy theorists, but among actual scientists and epidemiologists, is that there was some kind of a laboratory leakage where a virus that was being tested or researched, perhaps in search for more broadly effective vaccines. You create a virus that's hard to that spreads readily and then try to create vaccinations for it in a lab setting, may have gotten out of a laboratory environment. We do know that there are different levels of viral research that happen in industrialized countries. And so there are some questions about whether perhaps COVID-19 might have been a research virus, not a weapon, not a bioweapon, but a research virus that made it out of a laboratory.
Switching studies a bit, from a psychological perspective, what do you think we've learned about our species and communities coming out of the pandemic?
We've learned we are social mammals. When we have social isolation, that triples your risk for anxiety disorder and depression. And that risk persists for 9 years after the isolation ends.
Wow.
And so we learned that people don't weather isolation well. And we also learned that leadership matters. The fact that we weren't able to get cohesive recommendations and good behavioral modeling, not just in the U.S. government, but from governments and leaders all over the world, meant that most cultures failed to organize into a collective response. Basically, most cultures that have a more individualistic focus, in general, handled the pandemic more poorly. Now, there are exceptions, of course. Australia and New Zealand did really well.
Is there a current feeling in the scientific community that COVID-19 is something that's here for the long haul, kind of like the flu?
Yeah, COVID-19 is going to be around. We expect we'll have an annual COVID season, probably. The kind of vaccine infrastructure we've built out will need to be maintained and continue. It's likely that COVID immunity from the vaccines will, last months to a year. It won't last years. So we're going to be looking at annual or even biannual COVID boosters. Our goal here is to keep enough people vaccinated to avoid the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 specifically, from mutating at such a rate that it lowers efficacy and becomes more contagious and more deadly. Again, we've got more work to do in terms of childhood vaccination. So yeah, this is going to be a multi-year effort. But that said, we don't expect the kind of extended crushing waves that we've had in the past. And that's basically going to come down to the availability of vaccines and new vaccine formulations. The vaccines we have, by the way, are really, really good.
But also the people willing to take them. I mean, let's talk vaccines. I mean, I know we're going to have watchers and listeners who are skeptical of the science behind the vaccines. If you had to explain these vaccines to a skeptic and why they should take the vaccine, how would you do that?
Vaccines, other than maybe hand washing, are the most effective medical technology ever created in terms of saving lives. We don't have anything in the world of medicine that has so effectively mitigated disease and suffering as vaccines have. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy theories around vaccines, and I understand that. And we've seen what happens when conspiracy theories convince people to not get vaccinations. People get sick and die. I live in Los Angeles, where measles and mumps and whooping cough and all kinds of old diseases have started to make a comeback because of people who buy into this anti-vaccine stuff. And the outcome from that is adults and children get sick and they die. So the technology is really simple. Well, it's not really simple, but it's really well understood. We take pieces of viruses, not whole viruses, pieces of viruses that can't replicate inside your body, and we put it into your body's tissues so your immune system can see it, recognize it, and then create an antibody response so that when an actual virus like SARS-CoV-2 that causes the coronavirus, we call COVID-19, enters your body, your immune system is already primed what we call an adaptive immune system response. It has created special chemicals that attack that particular virus. These vaccines have been through the full normal multi-phase trials that show us not only efficacy but safety, and none of that was skipped. The way we got these viruses on the market so quickly was not by skipping safety steps, but by resourcing researchers with nearly unlimited budgets. And they're safe, they're effective, they work, and it's the only way we're going to get back to any kind of normal life again. And let's be real here. We've been through a fortunate period where we've had relatively few pandemics when compared to the amount of population growth we found on this planet. You should expect in the coming years more pandemics and potentially more severe pandemics. COVID-19 has been a great rehearsal for a pandemic that is more infectious and more deadly. And the only way we're going to be able to mitigate those things is the rapid production and distribution of vaccines.
Do we have reasons to worry about the long-term effects of the vaccine? I mean, I see people talking about damaging chemicals in vaccines and concerns with preservatives, like people had concerns with the MMR. What do you say to them?
Well, number one, the concern we'd have with any preservative is less than the concern we'd have with the disease in question. That's why we create vaccines, because diseases are deadly. But number two, let's talk about how chemistry works. Let's think about two chemicals that are incredibly dangerous, sodium and chlorine. Sodium is so volatile that if it contacts water, it explodes with incredible energy. And chlorine, as you know, is an incredible antibiotic, kill basically any cell we know of on contact. These two incredibly volatile chemicals, when combined together, make table salt. Right? We eat table salt all the time. It might cause hypertension if you have too much of it, but in general, it's a natural food preservative that's really effective, even though it's made of two terrifyingly dangerous chemicals. So molecules and chemical compounds can't be cleanly reduced to the elements that are in them. So if you hear that there's aluminum or mercury or something like that in a preservative, you're not talking about atomic or elemental mercury or aluminum. You're talking about something that is existing in a chemical chain that is not bioactive. They can't put something in a vaccine that's going to stay in your body for a long time or be fat soluble or do any of these kind of things that would be cause for concern. So no, we don't have concerns that there's some kind of long-term health consequence from this or any vaccine. That's never shown up in the data.
Let's talk about the Cozy Robot Show. I think you were just launching it at the time we last spoke. Tell us a little bit more about the show and what it's about.
The show is about empathetic skepticism. So we have two problems in our society that kind of blend together. Number one is we've lost our ability to understand our feelings or the feelings of other people. And that means when we talk about important matters, the conversations break down as people try to manage their reputations and emotional responses. And two is skepticism. We have falling levels of media literacy and information literacy and critical thinking skills. And so we've created a show that's interactive and participatory that helps people explore those ideas.
What kind of subjects can we expect to hear you talking about on the show?
Gosh, we pick all kinds of topics that our audience comes up with. So the people who watch the show decide what we're going to talk about together. We've talked about vaccines. We've talked about disease pathways. We've talked about grief. We've talked about relationship issues. We kind of talk about whatever people are interested in.
It seems like you've really created a unique online community where everyone can feel loved, accepted, and heard through your content. Was that kind of the goal, to allow a space for honest discussion and community around some really, really important issues?
It is. We kind of looked at Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and Bill Nye the Science Guy and wanted to put those in a blender and make a show for adults with those elements.
I've learned you've also recently been a science consultant for Marvel Studios. What does that mean? How did that come about? And are you now suddenly the coolest dad ever, or what?
Well, I can't say a lot because you sign a big NDA when you do any work with Disney. But I helped work through the scientific implications of the ideas in a lot of the projects in Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And to the second point, yeah, my kids thought it was really cool.
Where can our audience go to follow the Cozy Robot Show?
CozyRobots.com will take you right there, and you can watch live Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at CozyRobots.com/watch.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike, for being on the show again. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike the Science Guy, Mike McHargue.
Thanks, David.